I watched my 8-year-old son Tommy tear open the PlayStation 5 box at our family Christmas party, his face lighting up with pure joy. Then his smile crumpled as he pulled out a dusty old phone card from 1998. Meanwhile, my nephew Jake unwrapped an actual PS5 from the same grandmother. Mom laughed cruelly. "Santa only visits good kids, sweetheart." The entire room erupted in laughter at my son's devastation. That moment changed everything between my mother and me forever. 3 years ago, when my husband Michael died in that car accident on Interstate 65, I thought the hardest part would be explaining to Tommy why Daddy wasn't coming home. I was wrong. The hardest part turned out to be rebuilding our entire life from scratch while pretending everything was fine. Michael had been our stability. His job at the engineering firm provided our health insurance, our mortgage payments, our sense of security. When he died, those benefits disappeared faster than I could process the funeral arrangements. The life insurance helped initially, but between medical bills from his final hospital stay and the mounting everyday expenses of raising a child alone, that money dwindled quicker than I anticipated. I took whatever work I could find. Monday through Friday, I served coffee and scrambled eggs at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street, starting my shift at 5 in the morning to catch the construction workers heading to job sites. The pay barely covered our basic needs, but the tips from regulars like Frank and Bill helped stretch our grocery budget. Weekends, I worked retail at Macy's, folding clothes and helping customers find sizes, while my feet ached in shoes I couldn't afford to replace. Tommy never complained, though I knew he noticed things. He stopped asking for name, brand cereals. When his sneakers developed holes, he mentioned it casually rather than demanding new ones immediately. At 8 years old, my son had already learned to manage his expectations in ways that broke my heart. But Christmas was different. For weeks leading up to December, Tommy talked about the PlayStation 5 constantly. He'd seen commercials during his Saturday morning cartoons, and heard older kids at school discussing games. His eyes would light up describing the graphics, the speed, the incredible adventures waiting in those digital worlds. "Mom, do you think Santa knows I've been really good this year?" he asked one evening while we shared a box of mac and cheese for dinner. I helped Mrs. Patterson carry her groceries last week, and I didn't fight with Jake at Thanksgiving. I assured him that Santa definitely noticed good behavior, though my stomach twisted knowing I'd been checking our bank balance obsessively, trying to figure out how to make Christmas magical on $43.62. That's when my mother, Diane, stepped in with her promises. She called one Tuesday evening while I was washing dishes, her voice warm with what seemed like genuine concern. "Alice, sweetie, I've been thinking about Christmas. I know things have been tight since Michael passed, and I want to help make this holiday special for Tommy. Why don't you let me handle some of the bigger gifts this year?" Relief flooded through me so completely I had to grip the kitchen counter. "Mom, that's incredibly generous, but I don't want you spending beyond your means either." "Nonsense," she insisted. "I'm his grandmother. It's my job to spoil him occasionally. Besides, your brother Brad and I were just discussing how we want this to be a Christmas the kids remember forever." My brother Brad had always been the successful one. While I struggled through community college and worked various jobs before meeting Michael, Brad had earned his business degree and built a thriving insurance brokerage. His wife Sarah sold luxury homes in the affluent suburbs. They lived in a 4-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage, while Tommy and I rented a 1-bedroom apartment above the corner pharmacy. But Brad was also generous. He'd helped with Tommy's school supplies, and had quietly paid for Tommy's youth soccer registration last summer. I knew the family Christmas gathering at Mom's house would showcase their prosperity, but I'd grown comfortable with our simpler circumstances. We had love, health, and each other. That felt like enough. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that our family dynamics had shifted since Michael's death. Brad and Sarah's son Jake was also 8, born just 2 months before Tommy. At family gatherings, I noticed Jake always seemed to receive slightly better gifts, slightly more attention, slightly more encouragement from Mom. When I mentioned it to Michael during his final months, he'd suggested I was being oversensitive due to grief and stress. "Your mother loves Tommy," he'd assured me. "She's just more comfortable with Brad because he's her biological son, and you married into the family. Give it time." Now, 3 years later, I wondered if Michael had been right, or if my instincts had been warning me about something deeper. The week before Christmas, I discovered something that should have alarmed me more than it did. While cleaning out my purse, I found a crumpled receipt from the electronics store, where I'd been checking PS5 prices. But this wasn't my receipt. The date showed purchases from the same week Mom had called about helping with gifts, and the total was $1,537. I stared at the paper, confused about how it had ended up in my possession. Mom must have accidentally handed it to me during one of our coffee dates. $1,500 seemed like an enormous amount, but maybe she was buying gifts for multiple grandchildren. Brad and Sarah's extended family was large, and Mom prided herself on being the generous matriarch. I folded the receipt and forgot about it, too focused on my own careful savings plan to think much about Mom's spending habits. I'd been skipping lunch 3 days a week, and had picked up extra weekend shifts to accumulate enough money for a few modest gifts. Nothing approaching a PS5, but enough to make Christmas morning feel special. Hope filled our little apartment as December 24th approached. Tommy helped me wrap his gifts in newspaper comics since we couldn't afford proper wrapping paper, and he seemed genuinely excited about our Christmas plans. For the first time since Michael's death, I believed we might actually have a wonderful holiday. I had no idea that my mother's definition of making Christmas special included teaching my son a lesson I never could have imagined. Christmas morning in our apartment felt peaceful and intimate. Tommy bounded out of his room at 6:30, his hair sticking up in 12 different directions and his pajamas twisted from sleeping. The small tree we decorated with handmade ornaments and dollar-store tinsel looked cheerful in our living room corner, surrounded by the modest collection of gifts I'd managed to accumulate. "Can we open presents now, Mom? Please?" Tommy's excitement was infectious as he bounced on his toes beside the tree. "Let's have some breakfast first, buddy. Grandma Diane expects us at her house by 11, so we need to pace ourselves." I started coffee and poured cereal into our mismatched bowls, but Tommy could barely sit still long enough to eat. He kept glancing toward the tree, clearly hoping one of those packages might contain gaming magic. I'd found 2 used Nintendo games at the thrift store, and a Batman T-shirt on clearance at Target. Not the PS5 of his dreams, but thoughtful gifts chosen with love and our tight budget. "Mom, do you really think Grandma has something special planned?" Tommy asked between spoonfuls of cereal. She seemed super excited when she called yesterday. She did sound excited, I agreed. Though something about Mom's tone had felt slightly off. There'd been an edge to her enthusiasm that I couldn't quite identify. Whatever she has planned, I'm sure it will be wonderful. After breakfast, we opened our apartment gifts. Tommy's face lit up when he discovered the Nintendo games, and he hugged me tightly when he unwrapped the Batman shirt. "These are perfect, Mom. Thank you so much." His genuine appreciation made my chest tight with emotion. Despite our circumstances, he'd learned to find joy in simple gestures. I gave Tommy a long bubble bath while I prepared for the family gathering. My nicest dress was a navy blue number I'd worn to job interviews, and I paired it with the pearl earrings Michael had given me for our anniversary. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman who'd aged more than 3 years, should reflect, but who was surviving and building something meaningful for her son. The drive to Mom's house in our 10-year-old Honda took 25 minutes through suburban neighborhoods that grew progressively more affluent. By the time we reached her street, the houses had expanded into small mansions, with circular driveways and elaborate holiday decorations. Mom's home was a testament to the comfortable retirement she and Dad had built before his death 5 years earlier. The 2-story colonial featured large windows framed by black shutters, and this morning, golden light poured from every room. Her front yard displayed a winter wonderland of inflatable decorations and twinkling lights that had probably cost more than my monthly rent. Tommy pressed his face against the car window as we pulled into the driveway. "Wow, Grandma really went all out this year." Inside, the house buzzed with holiday energy. The massive Christmas tree in the living room reached nearly to the 10-foot ceiling, decorated with expensive ornaments and professional lighting. Garland draped every doorway and banister, filling the air with the scent of pine and cinnamon. Brad greeted us at the door, his genuine smile immediately putting me at ease. My brother had inherited Dad's tall frame and easy laugh, and despite our different life circumstances, he'd never made me feel inferior about my struggles. "Alice, you look great." He pulled me into a warm hug before turning to Tommy. "Hey there, sport. Ready for the best Christmas ever?" Behind Brad, his wife Sarah emerged from the kitchen, wearing an elegant red sweater that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Sarah had always been kind to me, though our conversations rarely went deeper than polite inquiries about work and Tommy's school progress. "Merry Christmas, Alice," Sarah said, offering a brief hug. "The kids are in the den playing video games if Tommy wants to join them." Tommy needed no encouragement. He raced toward the back of the house where we could hear the sounds of electronic warfare and children's laughter. Jake's voice called out excitedly as Tommy appeared, and I felt grateful that the cousins genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The extended family had already begun arriving. Mom's sister Ruth and her husband George had driven down from Indianapolis with their teenage daughter Emma. Brad's in, Laws were visiting from Michigan, and several family friends had been invited to join the celebration. The house felt wonderfully alive with conversation and laughter. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wearing a festive green dress and her best jewelry. At 68, she maintained the grace and style that had always defined her, though her smile seemed slightly more calculated than usual as she approached me. "Alice, darling, you made it!" She embraced me with theatrical warmth that felt performative. "I'm so excited for today. The children are going to have such a special Christmas." "Thank you so much for doing this, Mom. Tommy's been talking about today for weeks." "Oh, I have some wonderful surprises planned," she said, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that made me slightly uncomfortable. "Some children are going to learn important lessons today about gratitude and earning special treats." Before I could ask what she meant, Uncle George called Mom away to settle a debate about football scores, leaving me to mingle with the growing crowd of relatives and family friends. I found myself gravitating toward the den, where Tommy and Jake were indeed playing video games on Jake's existing gaming system. The boys had headsets on, and were engaged in some cooperative adventure that required intense concentration and frequent strategy discussions. "Mom, Jake is so good at this game. He's teaching me all the secret moves," Tommy called out when he noticed me in the doorway. Jake, a confident child with Brad's outgoing personality, grinned proudly. "Tommy learns really fast. We make a good team." Watching them play, I noticed Jake's setup was impressive. Multiple controllers, a large flat screen TV mounted on the wall, and at least 20 game titles organized on a nearby shelf. This wasn't just gaming equipment, it was a serious electronics investment. Sarah joined me in the doorway, following my gaze around the room. "Brad went a little overboard last year," she said with an apologetic laugh. "Jake had been wanting a gaming system for months, and you know how dads can be about spoiling their kids." "It's wonderful that they can play together," I replied diplomatically. "Tommy doesn't get much gaming time at home, so this is a real treat for him." As the morning progressed, I became more aware of the subtle dynamics I'd noticed at previous family gatherings. Conversations seemed to naturally divide between Brad's successful business ventures and my more modest work experiences. When relatives asked about my job at the diner, their tones carried a hint of sympathetic concern that made me feel like a charity case rather than a family member. But the most noticeable difference was in how Mom interacted with the boys. When Jake told stories about school or showed off a new toy, she listened with rapt attention and responded with enthusiastic praise. When Tommy spoke, she offered polite acknowledgement before redirecting her focus elsewhere. At one point, while the adults discussed vacation plans and home renovations, I overheard Mom talking quietly with Ruth near the Christmas tree. "It's so important for children to understand that life rewards hard work and good behavior," Mom was saying. "Some kids need to learn that lesson more than others." "Oh, Diane, you always were strict about teaching values," Ruth replied with a laugh. "I'm sure both boys will appreciate whatever you have planned." Something about Mom's tone made me pay closer attention, but before I could move closer to hear more, Brad appeared at my elbow with a cup of coffee. "How are you holding up?" he asked with genuine concern. "I know these big family gatherings can feel overwhelming sometimes." "I'm fine," I assured him, though my growing unease was difficult to ignore. "Just excited to see Tommy having such a good time." "He's a great kid, Alice. You should be proud of how you're raising him." Brad's sincerity touched me deeply. Despite our different circumstances, He'd never treated me as anything less than an equal member of the family. If only I could say the same about Mom's attitude. As we approached the gift exchange portion of the day, Mom clapped her hands together to gather everyone's attention. The living room filled with excited chatter as children and adults arranged themselves around the massive tree. "I have something very special planned for our boys this year," Mom announced, her voice carrying across the room with theatrical flair. "Two very special gifts that I think will create memories to last a lifetime." Tommy and Jake exchanged excited glances from their spot on the carpet, both boys practically vibrating with anticipation. Around the room, relatives smiled indulgently at Mom's obvious pleasure in her role as the gift-giving matriarch. I settled into a chair near the back of the room, coffee cup in hand, completely unprepared for the lesson my mother had planned to teach. The gift exchange began with the smaller presents distributed among the adults and extended family. Tommy received a book about dinosaurs from Aunt Ruth, and a box of art supplies from Brad and Sarah. Each gift met with genuine appreciation and careful examination. Jake opened similar offerings with equal enthusiasm, both boys demonstrating the polite gratitude we'd all taught them about receiving presents graciously. But the energy in the room shifted noticeably when Mom disappeared briefly and returned, carrying two identically sized boxes wrapped in silver paper with elaborate red bows. Both packages were clearly the same dimensions, and my heart began racing as I recognized the distinctive PlayStation 5 proportions from my research at the electronics store. "Now for the grand finale," Mom announced with theatrical flair, positioning herself between Tommy and Jake like a game show host presenting prizes. "These are very special gifts for two very special boys." Tommy's face transformed with pure wonder as Mom placed the first box in front of him. His hands trembled slightly as he touched the wrapping paper, clearly recognizing what lay beneath. Around the room, adult faces reflected, knowing smiles as they anticipated the boys' joy. "Can we open them at the same time?" Tommy asked Jake, his voice tight with excitement. "Yeah, on the count of 3. Jake agreed, equally animated. They counted together, their voices rising with anticipation, before tearing into the wrapping paper with 8-year-old enthusiasm. The reveal was simultaneous, both boys lifting identical PlayStation 5 boxes above their heads with triumphant shouts. For approximately 10 seconds, perfect happiness filled the room. Tommy's face glowed with disbelief and joy as he examined his box, running his fingers along the edges and reading the text aloud to himself. Jake was equally ecstatic, though his excitement carried the confidence of a child accustomed to receiving generous gifts. Then Tommy opened his box. The change in his expression was immediate and devastating. His smile froze, then slowly dissolved into confusion as he reached inside and pulled out a dusty, yellowed phone card from 1998. The plastic showed scratches and wear from years of storage, and the logo belonged to a telecommunications company that had gone out of business before Tommy was born. Meanwhile, Jake lifted an actual PlayStation 5 console from his box, complete with controllers and game titles, his excitement reaching fever pitch as he examined each component. "Grandma, I think there's been a mistake," Tommy said quietly, his voice small and uncertain. He held up the phone card with trembling fingers, looking between it and Jake's authentic gaming system with growing bewilderment. The room fell silent. Every adult face turned toward Mom with expressions ranging from confusion to dawning horror as they realized what was happening. Mom's response was swift and cruel. "Oh, sweetie, there's no mistake," she said with exaggerated sympathy, her voice dripping with condescension. "Santa only visits good kids. Maybe next year you'll earn something better." The words hit Tommy like a physical blow. His face crumpled as he processed the deliberate nature of this humiliation, understanding that this wasn't an accident or a mix-up, but an intentional message about his worth compared to his cousins. And then, the laughter started. It began with a few uncomfortable chuckles from family friends who thought this might be some elaborate joke with a surprise ending. But when Mom joined in with loud, deliberate laughter, others followed suit. The sound built across the room until it felt like a wall of ridicule surrounding my devastated son. Tommy's eyes filled with tears, but he fought them back with the dignity of a child who'd learned too young that life could be unfair and unpredictable. He set the phone card carefully back in the box and closed the lid, his small hands working with heartbreaking precision. "What did I do wrong, Grandma?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been good this year. I helped Mom with chores, and I shared my toys at school. And I didn't fight with Jake even when he accidentally broke my favorite truck." The innocence in his question silenced the laughter abruptly. Several relatives looked genuinely ashamed, while others stared at Mom with expressions of disbelief. But Mom wasn't finished. "Being good isn't just about following rules, Tommy," she continued, her tone now resembling a lecture rather than a holiday celebration. "It's about understanding your place and being grateful for what you have. Some children take too much for granted." I felt something snap inside my chest. This wasn't about teaching gratitude or values. This was systematic cruelty, designed to humiliate my son in front of our entire family while elevating Jake. The calculation behind it was breathtaking in its malice. Jake, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, was examining his new gaming system with unrestrained joy. His excitement formed a stark contrast to Tommy's quiet devastation, making the inequality even more painful to witness. Brad and Sarah exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing that something was seriously wrong with this scenario. Sarah reached toward Tommy as if to comfort him, but Mom interceded quickly. Now, let's not make a big production out of this," Mom said briskly. "Children need to learn that life isn't always fair, and the sooner they understand that, the better prepared they'll be for adulthood." "But, Diane," Aunt Ruth interjected hesitantly, "maybe we could find Tommy something else under the tree? Something more appropriate for a child his age?" Mom's smile turned arctic. "This is exactly appropriate for Tommy. He needs to understand that good things come to children who truly deserve them. Maybe next Christmas will be different, if he learns the right lessons this year." The room's atmosphere had shifted completely. What should have been a joyous family celebration now felt like a courtroom where my 8-year-old son had been tried and found guilty of crimes no one could articulate. I watched Tommy's small shoulders square with determination as he made a decision that broke my heart. He stood up carefully, walked over to Jake, and forced a smile onto his face. "Congratulations, Jake. That's a really cool PlayStation. I hope you have fun with it." The grace my son showed in that moment, protecting Jake from feeling guilty about the adult's cruelty, was more mature than anything I'd witnessed from the grown-ups in the room. Tommy's kindness in the face of deliberate humiliation revealed exactly who the good kid really was. But I was done watching my child suffer for the entertainment of people who should have been protecting him. As conversations resumed around us, and Jake became absorbed in examining his new electronics, I made a mental note of every face that had laughed at Tommy's devastation. Some relatives now looked ashamed, but others seemed to accept Mom's explanation about teaching valuable life lessons. The phone card sat in its box like evidence of something far more sinister than holiday disappointment. This had been planned, orchestrated, and executed with precision. The question was why. I excused myself quietly and headed toward Mom's home office, my mind racing with possibilities and my heart burning with protective fury. 30 minutes later, I would have my answers, and Mom would have a Christmas surprise of her own. Tommy deserved better than this family's twisted idea of holiday spirit, and I was about to make sure he got it. I slipped away from the living room while Jake enthusiastically explained PlayStation 5 features to a circle of interested relatives, and Tommy sat quietly in a corner chair, still processing his humiliation. The hallway leading to Mom's home office felt longer than usual as I walked with purpose toward answers I wasn't sure I wanted to find. Mom's office had always been her private sanctuary, filled with antique furniture, family photos, and the business correspondence left over from her decades as a bookkeeper for local small businesses. The room smelled like lemon furniture polish and old paper, comforting scents that had once represented security and family stability. But today, I was seeing everything through different eyes. I started with the obvious places first, checking the desk drawers and filing cabinets for anything that might explain the calculated cruelty I'd just witnessed. What kind of grandmother deliberately humiliates one grandchild while rewarding another? What had Tommy done to deserve such treatment? It was in the third desk drawer that I found the first piece of evidence that changed everything. Mixed among Mom's personal papers was an unopened envelope addressed to Thomas Michael Henderson in formal business letterhead. My son's full name, written in the careful script of legal correspondence. The return address, showed Midwest Trust Management Services. My hands trembled as I stared at the envelope. Tommy had never received business mail at Mom's address. Why would a trust management company be writing to my 8-year-old son? With growing dread, I opened the letter. "Dear Mr. Henderson," it began. "This statement reflects the current balance and recent activity for the educational trust fund established by your father, Michael James Henderson, prior to his death in November 2021. The words blurred as I read further. Educational Trust Fund. Established by Michael. My late husband had set up a trust fund for Tommy's education, and somehow these statements were being sent to my mother's house instead of mine. According to the statement, the account had been established with an initial deposit of $50,000 from Michael's life insurance benefits, with instructions for quarterly additions from a separate investment account. The fund was specifically designated for Tommy's educational expenses, from elementary school supplies through college tuition. But the current balance showed only $8,437. Frantically, I searched through the drawer until I found more statements, each one showing regular withdrawals over the past 3 years. The pattern was clear and devastating. Every few months, significant amounts disappeared from Tommy's fund, ranging from $500 to $2,000 per withdrawal. My breath came in short gasps as I processed the implications. Michael had left money specifically for Tommy's future, money that should have been easing our financial struggles all along. Instead, someone had been systematically draining the account while I worked 2 jobs and skipped meals to pay for basic necessities. But who had access to Tommy's trust fund? The original documentation would have required a guardian's signature and approval for withdrawals. As Tommy's mother, I should have been the primary trustee, but these statements were arriving at Mom's house, which meant I found the answer in a folder marked Tommy's account. The trustee authorization forms showed my mother's name as the primary account manager, with my signature apparently giving her full withdrawal privileges. Except I had never signed anything giving Mom control over money from Michael's estate. The signature looked convincing at first glance, but examining it closely, I could see subtle differences in the letter formation that suggested forgery. Someone had practiced reproducing my handwriting well enough to fool bank officials, but not well enough to fool me. More paperwork revealed the systematic nature of Mom's deception. Every withdrawal corresponded with major purchases for Jake: his gaming system, expensive sports equipment, designer clothes, summer camp fees. Tommy's educational fund had been transformed into Jake's entertainment budget while I struggled to afford school supplies. But the most damning evidence was what I found next. Handwritten notes in Mom's familiar script, apparently planning her expenditures. Jake's birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese, $600 from Tommy's account. Jake's baseball glove and cleats, $450 from educational fund. Christmas PlayStation 5 for Jake, $780, $9 from trust money. Each notation was accompanied by justifications written in Mom's hand. Alice won't know the difference. Tommy doesn't need expensive toys right now. Jake appreciates quality gifts more than Tommy would. The final note made my blood run cold. Christmas lesson for Tommy. Teach him not to expect things he hasn't earned. Use old phone card from junk drawer. Will be good for his character development. This wasn't just theft. This was psychological manipulation designed to make Tommy feel worthless while using his own inheritance money to shower his cousin with expensive gifts. Mom had been deliberately creating a dynamic where Jake appeared to be the favored, successful grandchild, while Tommy learned to accept scraps and feel grateful for them. I discovered even more evidence of the systematic favoritism when I found her correspondence folder. Letters from teachers praising Tommy's academic achievements had been filed away unread, while Jake's report cards were prominently displayed on her desk with handwritten notes of pride and encouragement. Birthday cards addressed to Tommy from distant relatives had been opened and stored without being forwarded, while Jake's cards were carefully preserved in a scrapbook. Even sympathy cards sent to Tommy after his father's death had been intercepted and hidden, denying him the comfort and support intended by caring friends and family members. The scope of Mom's deception was staggering. She'd been actively undermining Tommy's emotional support system while enriching Jake's experience, all funded by money that belonged to Tommy in the first place. But the most devastating discovery was a handwritten letter tucked behind the financial statements, written in Michael's familiar handwriting shortly before his death. "Dear Diane," it read, "I'm writing this to thank you for agreeing to oversee Tommy's educational fund during these difficult final weeks. I know Alice will be overwhelmed with grief and logistics after I'm gone, and it comforts me to know you'll ensure Tommy never wants for anything important." The letter continued, "Please make sure Tommy knows his dad provided for his future, even though I won't be there to see him grow up. This money represents my love and faith in his potential. I trust you to use it wisely and help Alice understand the resources available for his development. Most importantly, please help Tommy feel secure and valued during this transition. He's going to need extra reassurance that he's cherished and supported by his extended family. Thank you for being the grandmother I know you can be." The letter was signed with Michael's full signature and dated just 6 days before his death. My husband had trusted my mother to protect and provide for our son. Instead, she'd stolen Tommy's inheritance, forged my authorization, and used the money to create a hierarchy of worth that positioned Tommy as the family disappointment. Michael's final wish had been for Tommy to feel secure and valued by his extended family. Instead, Mom had systematically designed experiences to make him feel unwanted and undeserving. The cruelty of it was breathtaking in its calculation and duration. I photographed every document with my phone, my hands shaking with a combination of rage and heartbreak. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. My mother had spent the last 3 years stealing from her deceased son, in law's legacy, while gaslighting her daughter and emotionally abusing her grandson. The fake PlayStation 5 wasn't just a mean-spirited prank. It was the culmination of a 3-year campaign designed to convince Tommy that he deserved less love, less investment, and less hope than his cousin. But Mom had made one crucial mistake in her elaborate deception. She'd underestimated how fiercely I would fight for my son when I finally understood what was happening. As I returned to the living room with my evidence secured, I felt a clarity and determination I hadn't experienced since Michael's death. Tommy deserved justice, and he was about to get it. I just needed to decide how to deliver the lesson Mom had earned about consequences and accountability. The phone card in its box was about to become the least significant gift exchanged this Christmas. The walk back to the living room felt like crossing a battlefield where I was the only one who understood that a war was being fought. My phone contained enough evidence to destroy my mother's carefully constructed image and expose 3 years of calculated theft and manipulation. The question now was how to deliver justice in a way that would truly protect Tommy and teach the right lessons to everyone involved. I paused in the hallway, listening to the sounds of continued celebration. Jake's excited voice carried clearly as he described his PlayStation 5's features to Uncle George, while other relatives discussed dinner plans and travel arrangements. The normalcy of their conversations felt surreal given what I'd just discovered. Tommy's voice was noticeably absent from the chatter. I found him in the kitchen, standing on a step stool at the sink, methodically washing his hands with the focused concentration children use when processing difficult emotions. His small shoulders were set in a straight line that reminded me heartbreakingly of Michael's posture when he was working through problems. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay, Mom," he replied without looking up, though his voice carried a tremor that suggested otherwise. "I was just thinking about what Grandma said about being good and earning things." My heart clenched as I watched him scrub his already clean hands with unnecessary vigor. "What were you thinking about that?" "Well, I've been trying really hard to be good, but maybe I don't understand what good means. Like, maybe I should have helped you more with the dishes, or maybe I should have gotten better grades on my math tests, or maybe, Tommy." I turned him gently to face me, kneeling so we were at eye level. "Listen to me very carefully. You are one of the best kids I've ever known. You're kind, helpful, honest, and thoughtful. Nothing that happened today has anything to do with your behavior or your worth as a person. But Grandma said Santa only visits good kids, and Jake got the PlayStation, so that means Grandma made some very poor choices that have nothing to do with who you are," I interrupted firmly. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, even big ones. What happened today was not your fault." Tommy studied my face with the intensity children reserve for conversations they sense might be important. "Are you sure, Mom? because I really have been trying to be good. I'm absolutely sure, I assured him, pulling him into a tight hug. And you know what? I think some people are about to learn some important lessons about treating people fairly and telling the truth. I helped him down from the step stool, my mind working through the logistics of my developing plan. The evidence on my phone was damning, but I needed to present it in a way that would maximize the impact and ensure lasting change rather than temporary embarrassment. Mom had orchestrated Tommy's humiliation as public theater, ensuring maximum witnesses to his degradation. It seemed appropriate to return the favor. But first, I needed the right prop. I slipped back into Mom's office and found a small gift box in her supply closet, the kind she typically used for jewelry presents. I printed copies of the most damning documents. The trust fund statements showing the systematic withdrawals, the forged authorization bearing my signature, the correspondence from Michael expressing his trust in her guardianship, and her own handwritten notes detailing how she'd used Tommy's money for Jake's gifts. I arranged everything carefully in the box, making sure the papers would be immediately visible when opened. On top, I placed a small note written in my clearest handwriting. From Santa, for someone who needs to learn about being good. The parallel to her cruel message to Tommy was intentional and satisfying. As I prepared to return to the family gathering, memories flooded back of previous holidays and family events, viewed now through the lens of my new understanding. Countless small incidents suddenly made perfect sense. Mom's dismissive reactions to Tommy's achievements, her elaborate praise for Jake's minor accomplishments, her subtle comments about some children needing to learn life lessons. I remembered the last Christmas before Michael's death, when both boys had received equally thoughtful gifts and equal attention. Mom's favoritism had begun immediately after Michael's funeral, suggesting that his presence had somehow kept her worst impulses in check. The calculated nature of her deception was stunning. She'd managed the trust fund paperwork expertly, forged documents convincingly, and maintained her theft for 3 years without detection. This wasn't impulsive cruelty, but systematic abuse planned and executed with precision. But she'd also made critical errors that revealed her true motivations. Her handwritten notes showed that this wasn't about teaching Tommy valuable life lessons, as she'd claimed. It was about establishing a hierarchy where Jake received material advantages while Tommy learned to accept disappointment as his normal experience. The phone card prank was the culmination of this strategy, designed to humiliate Tommy publicly while demonstrating Jake's superior status in the family structure. She'd wanted Tommy to feel worthless and grateful for scraps, while his own inheritance money funded Jake's privileged experience. Mom had underestimated 3 crucial factors: my investigative persistence, the paper trail she'd carelessly left behind, and the protective fury of a mother who'd finally understood what was happening to her child. But most importantly, she'd underestimated Tommy's essential goodness and resilience. Despite 3 years of systematic favoritism and manipulation, he'd remained kind, generous, and hopeful. His first instinct, after being humiliated, was to congratulate Jake rather than feel resentful or competitive. Tommy's character had developed beautifully, despite Mom's attempts to damage his self-worth, which proved that her assessment of his worthiness was not just wrong, but maliciously backwards. As I prepared to rejoin the family gathering with my carefully prepared gift, I felt a sense of justice building that was both satisfying and necessary. Tommy deserved to see that truth mattered, that theft had consequences, and that someone would fight fiercely for his rights and dignity. Mom was about to receive an education about accountability that was long overdue. The family was still gathered in the living room when I returned, though the energy had shifted considerably since the gift exchange. Several relatives were making preparation noises about heading home, while others engaged in the subdued conversations that follow uncomfortable social situations. Tommy was sitting with Jake, watching him explore his new gaming system, showing no resentment despite everything that had happened. His generosity of spirit in the face of deliberate cruelty made me even more determined to ensure justice prevailed. "Mom," I called across the room, my voice carrying clearly through the space. "I have something for you. A small Christmas gift I put together specially." She looked up with surprise, and what appeared to be relief, probably grateful for any gesture that might restore normal family dynamics after the awkward gift exchange. "Oh, Alice, that's so thoughtful," she responded warmly, her public persona immediately snapping back into place. "You really didn't need to get me anything. Trust me," I replied, extending the small box toward her. "I think you're going to find this gift very enlightening." Around the room, relatives paused their conversations to watch this apparent peace offering between mother and daughter. The gift exchange had left everyone feeling unsettled, and they seemed hopeful that this gesture might restore family harmony. If they only knew what restoration actually required. The room settled into expectant quiet, as Mom accepted my gift with theatrical graciousness, her smile radiating the warm confidence of someone accustomed to being the matriarch whose gestures set the family's emotional tone. She held the small box delicately, as if it contained precious jewelry or sentimental keepsakes. "Alice, you really shouldn't have," she said, her voice carrying across the room with calculated charm. "You work so hard, and money is tight. I hope you didn't spend too much on your old mother." Around us, relatives relaxed visibly, apparently viewing this exchange as evidence that family tensions were resolving naturally. Brad smiled encouragingly from his position near the fireplace, while Sarah busied herself collecting discarded wrapping paper with the efficient movements of someone eager to restore order. Tommy looked up from Jake's gaming demonstration with curiosity, probably wondering what modest gift I might have managed on our limited budget. His expression held no resentment, only genuine interest in this unexpected development. Mom settled into her favorite armchair, the Queen's throne from which she typically orchestrated family gatherings, and began unwrapping my gift with the deliberate care of someone who enjoyed being the center of attention. The room's focus settled on her hands as she removed the simple wrapping paper and lifted the box lid. The change in her expression was immediate and devastating. Her face drained of color as she recognized the first document visible in the box, the trust fund statement showing systematic withdrawals from Tommy's educational account. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the papers, scanning the evidence of her 3-year theft with growing horror. "What is this?" she whispered, though her tone suggested she understood exactly what she was looking at. "Financial documents," I replied calmly, my voice carrying clearly through the now silent room. "Trust fund statements, withdrawal records, and correspondence related to Tommy's educational account." "I don't understand," Mom said, but her defensive posture contradicted her words. She was clutching the papers as if they might disappear, her eyes darting between the evidence and my face with obvious panic. "I think you understand perfectly," I continued, maintaining steady eye contact. "These documents show that my late husband established a $50,000 educational trust fund for Tommy before his death. They also show that someone has been making unauthorized withdrawals from that account for the past 3 years. The room's atmosphere shifted dramatically as relatives began processing the implications of this revelation. Brad straightened from his casual position by the fireplace, his expression moving from confusion to concern as he realized something serious was unfolding. "Alice, surely there's been some misunderstanding," Mom said, her voice rising slightly with desperation. "I've been helping manage Tommy's finances, but everything I've done has been in his best interest." "Is that what you call it?" I reached into the box and pulled out the handwritten notes detailing her expenditures. "Because according to your own records, Tommy's trust fund has been paying for Jake's PlayStation 5, his expensive sports equipment, his summer camp fees, and numerous other gifts that somehow ended up benefiting your other grandson." Sarah gasped audibly as the scope of the situation became clear. Brad's face darkened with understanding and growing anger as he processed what his son's gifts had cost his nephew's future. "Those notes don't mean what you think they mean," Mom insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was simply keeping track of family expenses, and sometimes accounts get confused when you're managing multiple budgets." "Multiple budgets?" I pulled out the forged authorization forms. "This document shows my signature authorizing you to manage Tommy's trust fund. Except I never signed this paper, Mom. I never even knew the trust fund existed until today." The silence that followed was absolute. Every adult in the room stared at the evidence in my hands, the implications registering with varying degrees of shock and dismay. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding or bookkeeping error. This was systematic theft involving forgery and deception. Tommy, still too young to fully understand the financial complexities being discussed, sensed the gravity of the situation and moved closer to my side. Jake remained focused on his gaming system, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around him. "Mom," Brad said quietly, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Tell me this isn't what it looks like." "Bradley, you don't understand the full situation," Mom replied desperately, turning toward her biological son for support. "Alice has been struggling, and I've been trying to help both families manage their resources effectively. Sometimes that requires making difficult decisions about priorities." "Difficult decisions?" I interrupted, my voice rising, despite my efforts to remain calm. "Like deciding to steal from a dead man's legacy to his son? Like forging legal documents? Like using Tommy's college fund to buy Jake's Christmas presents?" I pulled out Michael's final letter and read aloud. "Please make sure Tommy knows his dad provided for his future, even though I won't be there to see him grow up. This money represents my love and faith in his potential. Most importantly, please help Tommy feel secure and valued during this transition. He's going to need extra reassurance that he's cherished and supported by his extended family." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Several relatives wiped their eyes as they processed the contrast between Michael's loving intentions and the reality of what had happened to his final gift to his son. "Michael trusted you to protect Tommy's future," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "Instead, you've spent 3 years teaching him that he deserves less than his cousin, using his own inheritance money to prove your point. That's not, I never intended." Mom's composure was crumbling rapidly as she realized that denial was no longer viable. "The phone card wasn't just a cruel prank, was it?" I pressed on. "It was the final insult in a 3-year campaign to make Tommy feel worthless while using his money to elevate Jake. You've been stealing from a child's future to buy your other grandchild's love." Brad crossed the room and took the documents from Mom's shaking hands, scanning the evidence with increasing dismay. His face grew darker as he processed each piece of information, understanding not just the theft, but the psychological manipulation that had accompanied it. $8,437, he read from the trust statement. "That's all that's left of $50,000. Mom, how could you do this to Tommy? How could you do this to Alice?" "I was trying to teach important lessons about gratitude and earning rewards," Mom insisted, but her justification sounded hollow, even to herself. "Some children need to understand that life isn't always fair, and Tommy was becoming too entitled, too expectant of special treatment." "Too entitled?" Sarah spoke for the first time since the revelations began, her voice sharp with disbelief. "He's an 8-year-old boy whose father died. How is mourning child entitled for hoping his grandmother might treat him fairly? And meanwhile," Brad added grimly, "my son has been receiving gifts bought with money that belonged to his cousin. Jake's PlayStation 5, his sports equipment, his summer camp registration, all paid for by Tommy's college fund." The scope of the betrayal was settling over the room like a toxic cloud. Relatives who'd initially assumed they were witnessing a simple family disagreement now understood they'd been witnesses to something far more serious and damaging. Uncle George, who'd remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Diane, this is theft. What you've described is felony theft from a minor child. You could go to prison for this." "Prison?" Mom's voice cracked with panic. "Surely we can resolve this within the family. I never meant any harm. I can pay the money back." "With what money?" I demanded. "You've already spent $42,000 of Tommy's inheritance. Do you have $42,000 lying around to restore what you stole?" The question hung unanswered, because we all knew the reality of Mom's financial situation. Her comfortable retirement was based on careful budgeting, not abundant wealth. She'd spent money she couldn't replace on gifts designed to create an artificial hierarchy between her grandchildren. "I'll figure something out," she said desperately. "I'll take out loans. I'll sell things. Just please don't involve lawyers or police. Think about what this would do to our family." "What this would do to our family?" I repeated incredulously. "What about what you've already done to our family? What about 3 years of watching Tommy learn to accept less, while thinking he didn't deserve better?" Brad was examining the handwritten notes detailing Mom's expenditures with obvious disgust. "These records show you planned Tommy's humiliation carefully. The phone card wasn't impulsive cruelty. You wrote about teaching him character development through disappointment. Around the room, relatives were processing their own complicity in the psychological abuse they'd witnessed. Several faces showed obvious shame as they remembered laughing at Tommy's devastation during the gift exchange, unaware they were participating in institutional gaslighting funded by the victim's own inheritance. Tommy tugged at my sleeve, his face serious and thoughtful. "Mom, does this mean Dad really did leave money for my school?" "Yes, sweetheart," I replied, kneeling to his level. "Your father loved you very much, and wanted to make sure you'd have everything you needed for your education. That money was always yours." "And Grandma used my money to buy Jake's PlayStation?" The simple question, asked with a child's directness, crystallized the moral bankruptcy of what had occurred. An 8-year-old could immediately understand the fundamental unfairness that adults had rationalized or ignored. "Yes," I confirmed gently. "But that's not your fault, and it's not Jake's fault either. Sometimes adults make very bad decisions that hurt the people they should be protecting." Mom's face crumpled as she finally grasped the full impact of her actions as seen through the innocent eyes of her grandson. The elaborate justifications about teaching life lessons and managing expectations dissolved under the simple truth that she'd stolen from one child to benefit another. But justice required more than recognition. It demanded accountability and restoration. The silence that followed Tommy's question stretched uncomfortably as the full weight of Mom's actions settled over everyone in the room. My 8-year-old son had articulated what all the adults were thinking. This was fundamentally wrong, and no amount of rationalization could make it right. Brad was the first to speak, his voice heavy with determination and shame. "Mom, this ends today. Jake is giving that PlayStation 5 to Tommy immediately, and we're driving to the bank first thing tomorrow morning to begin restoring every penny you've stolen." "Bradley, you don't understand," Mom began weakly. "No, I understand perfectly," he interrupted, his patience clearly exhausted. "My son has been receiving gifts bought with money stolen from his cousin. That PlayStation 5 belongs to Tommy, along with every other gift you purchased with his trust fund money. We're going to make this right." Jake, who'd been quietly listening to the adult conversation while continuing to examine his gaming system, looked up with innocent confusion. "Dad, what's wrong? Did I do something bad?" Sarah knelt beside her son, her face showing the strain of explaining complex adult failures to a child. "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. But it turns out the money for your Christmas present came from Tommy's college fund by mistake. The right thing to do is give it to Tommy since it really belongs to him." Jake looked between his new PlayStation 5 and his cousin with the serious expression children wear when processing concepts of fairness and ownership. After a moment that seemed to last forever, he stood up and carried the gaming system over to Tommy. "Here, Tommy," he said simply, offering the console and controllers. "This is really yours." "I'm sorry Grandma got confused about whose present it was." Tommy looked between Jake and the PlayStation 5 with obvious uncertainty, glancing at me for guidance. The gesture was exactly what he'd dreamed of receiving, but the circumstances made acceptance complicated. "It's okay to take it, buddy," I assured him gently. "Jake is doing the right thing, and this really does belong to you." Tommy accepted the gaming system with careful reverence, examining it as if it might disappear at any moment. "Thank you, Jake," he said quietly. "Maybe we can play together sometimes?" "Of course," Jake replied immediately. "I can teach you all the best games." The simple generosity between the cousins provided a stark contrast to the adults' complex web of deception and theft. Both boys understood fairness instinctively in ways that their grandmother had somehow forgotten. But while the immediate injustice was being addressed, larger questions remained about accountability and prevention. Uncle George, whose legal background gave him perspective on the broader implications, addressed Mom directly. "Diane, you need to understand that what you've done constitutes multiple felonies. Identity theft, forgery, embezzlement from a minor's account. Alice would have every right to press criminal charges." "Please," Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I know I made terrible mistakes. I just wanted Jake to have the same advantages as other children in his class. His friends all have expensive toys and electronics, and I thought if I could give him those things, he'd feel more confident and successful." So you decided to steal them from Tommy? Aunt Ruth asked incredulously. How did that logic make sense to you? Mom's explanation revealed the twisted reasoning that had justified her actions over 3 years. Alice was struggling anyway, and I thought Tommy was too young to miss money he didn't know existed. I planned to replace it gradually, but Jake's needs kept growing, and the withdrawals became larger than I anticipated. Tommy's needs were growing too, I pointed out sharply. He needed school supplies, sports equipment, clothes, and experiences. Instead of using his own money for those things, I worked 2 jobs and went without meals while you funded Jake's childhood with money that belonged to Tommy. Brad was examining the financial statements with growing anger as the full scope became clear. Mom, these records show you withdrew money for Jake's birthday parties, vacation activities, private baseball lessons. You created an entirely different standard of living for him, using Tommy's college fund. I thought Alice would never find out, Mom admitted miserably. I managed all the paperwork, and the statements came here instead of to her address. I thought I could replace the money gradually, without anyone knowing the difference. But you never intended to replace it, Sarah observed. These withdrawal records show increasing amounts over time, not decreasing amounts as you supposedly work toward repayment. The evidence painted a picture of escalating theft as Mom became more comfortable with her deception and more invested in maintaining Jake's privileged status relative to Tommy. What might have started as a small loan had evolved into systematic embezzlement. Tommy, meanwhile, was quietly exploring his PlayStation 5 with Jake's enthusiastic guidance, both boys absorbed in the technology and oblivious to the financial complexities being discussed around them. Their easy friendship provided hope that the cousins' relationship could survive the adults' failures. But the conversation wasn't finished with immediate resolution. Long-term consequences needed to be established. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, my voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made final decisions. Every penny of Tommy's trust fund will be restored within 60 days, along with interest and penalties for early withdrawal. If you can't manage that, we'll involve lawyers and let courts determine appropriate restitution. Alice, I don't have that kind of money available, Mom protested weakly. Then you'll find it, Brad stated firmly. Sell your jewelry, downsize your house, take out loans. I don't care what you have to do, but Tommy's college fund will be restored completely, and there will be consequences beyond financial restitution, I continued. Your access to Tommy will be supervised until you demonstrate that you understand the seriousness of what you've done and can be trusted to treat him fairly. You can't keep me from my grandson, Mom said desperately. I can and I will, I replied calmly. You've spent 3 years psychologically abusing him while stealing his inheritance. Supervised visits are generous given the circumstances. Around the room, relatives were processing their own roles in enabling the abuse through their laughter and acceptance of Tommy's mistreatment. Several family members approached me with apologies for their participation in humiliating my son. We should have spoken up when we saw how you were treating Tommy differently, Aunt Ruth said with obvious regret. We knew it wasn't right, but we didn't want to cause family drama. Family drama is exactly what should have happened, I replied. Tommy needed advocates, not polite silence from people who witnessed his mistreatment. The conversation turned to practical matters of restoration and accountability. Brad arranged to meet with the bank immediately after Christmas to begin transferring money back into Tommy's trust fund. Mom would be required to provide detailed accounting of every withdrawal and its purpose, ensuring nothing was overlooked in the restitution process. Uncle George offered to review all legal documents to ensure proper restoration of Tommy's account and appropriate safeguards against future unauthorized access. Sarah volunteered to help coordinate the return of any other gifts that had been purchased with Tommy's money. Most importantly, the family established new standards for transparency and fairness in their treatment of both grandchildren. No more secret favoritism. No more different rules for different children. No more tolerance for manipulation disguised as life lessons. As the evening progressed, Mom's tears gradually subsided into exhausted resignation as she accepted the consequences of her actions. The elaborate justifications about teaching character development had collapsed under scrutiny, leaving only the simple truth that she'd stolen from one grandchild to benefit another. But there was one final revelation that provided crucial understanding of her motivations. During a quiet moment while others discussed logistics, Mom approached me with obvious difficulty. "Alice, I need you to understand something about why I did this. It wasn't just about the money or wanting to spoil Jake." "Then what was it about?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her rationalization. "I resented Michael," she admitted quietly. "When you married him, I felt like I was losing my daughter to someone who thought he was better than our family. His college education, his engineering job, his plans for Tommy's future, it all made me feel inadequate and defensive. The honesty was unexpected and painful in its implications. So you took out your feelings about my dead husband on his son? I thought if I could prove that Tommy didn't need his father's money to be happy, it would somehow diminish Michael's importance in your life. I wanted you to depend on me the way you had before you got married." The psychological complexity of her motivations was staggering and heartbreaking. She'd manipulated a grieving child and struggling single mother to satisfy her own insecurities about losing influence in her daughter's life. "Mom, I needed your support after Michael died, not your competition with his memory. Tommy needed his grandmother's love, not punishment for his father's success." "I know that now," she whispered. "I know I've damaged everything that mattered most. I just hope someday you and Tommy can forgive me." Forgiveness felt premature given the scope of her betrayal, but I could see a path toward eventual healing if she demonstrated genuine change through her actions rather than just her words. The evening ended with concrete plans for restoration and accountability, but also with a new understanding of the psychological factors that had motivated the abuse. Mom's actions were inexcusable, but comprehensible within the context of her insecurities and grief. As we prepared to leave, Tommy approached his grandmother with the serious expression he'd worn throughout the difficult conversation. "Grandma, I'm sad that you took my dad's money, but I still love you. I hope you can learn to be fair to both me and Jake." The simple forgiveness offered by an 8-year-old who'd been systematically mistreated provided a model of grace that humbled every adult in the room. Tommy's response demonstrated the character development that actually mattered: kindness in the face of cruelty, hope despite disappointment, and love that persisted through betrayal. Mom knelt to Tommy's level, tears flowing freely as she embraced her grandson. "I'm so sorry, Tommy. I made terrible mistakes, and I'm going to spend a very long time making them right. You deserve so much better than the way I've treated you." "It's okay, Grandma," he replied simply. "People make mistakes. The important thing is learning how to fix them." 6 months later, Tommy's trust fund had been fully restored with additional funds, contributed by Mom's downsizing and Brad's guilt-motivated generosity. Mom was attending therapy to address the insecurities that had motivated her abuse, and slowly rebuilding relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation. The PlayStation 5 had become a bridge rather than a symbol of inequality, with both boys enjoying shared gaming time that strengthened their friendship. Jake had learned valuable lessons about fairness and generosity, while Tommy had discovered that standing up for what's right sometimes requires difficult conversations with people you love. Most importantly, our family had learned that true character development comes not from arbitrary punishment or manufactured disappointment, but from witnessing justice, experiencing fairness, and understanding that every person's dignity deserves protection regardless of their age or circumstances. The greatest gift any child can receive is the knowledge that someone will fight for their rights, advocate for their needs, and ensure that love is demonstrated through actions rather than just words. That Christmas, Tommy finally received the security and validation that his father had intended to provide, along with the understanding that family means protecting each other rather than competing for limited affection. Sometimes, the most important lessons aren't about accepting unfairness, but about refusing to tolerate it when you finally have the power to demand better. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were treating someone unfairly? How do you think children learn the difference between genuine life lessons and manipulation disguised as character building? I'd love to hear your thoughts about protecting kids while maintaining family relationships in the comments below. Please like this story if it resonated with you, subscribe for more real, life family experiences, and share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding how psychological manipulation can hide behind good intentions. Thank you for listening to Tommy's story, and I hope your own families find the courage to choose fairness and honesty over comfortable silence when children need advocates. Remember that every child deserves to feel valued and protected by the adults in their lives, and sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable harmful behavior, even when it comes from people we care about.